As the conflict between Israel and Hamas enters its 21st day, the death toll continues to climb as 7,000 Palestinians have been killed. President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for an immediate ceasefire, urging the international community to accelerate its support for an inclusive process that results in a viable two-state solution. Tonight, 193 members of the United Nations General Assembly are expected to vote on the way forward. Palestine is not able to participate in the same way as full UN member states. They are just an observer state. In his opinion piece, international relations expert Professor John Stremlau believes that South Africa's support for the people of Palestine may provide a moral and diplomatic counterpoint should any peace process finally unfold. Professor Stremlau joins us now for more. Thank you so much, Professor, for your time this evening. It certainly is a very difficult situation. It's difficult to watch the situation unfold day after day, despite the fact that we're safe in our homes. I think many of us are very, very aware of the obliteration of the people of Palestine in the Gaza Strip. What can South Africa do in mediating? Can we play a role at tonight's UN General Assembly vote on the situation? How do you see it unfolding?
Well, thank you, Anne-Lee. I'm very concerned, as you are, with the terrible, terrible human suffering. And I think the UN is right to take this up. I just don't think that the UN has the kind of clout politically that is necessary and that is not quite ripe yet on either side. President Ramaphosa has made it plain that he's sympathetic to the Palestinian cause, and that's a plus because the U.S. is so heavily invested in the Israeli side that you need a credible representative in any peace process who can speak to the sympathies of the Palestinian people as South Africa can. But the key to getting a South African solution back in the day here was to have leaders on both sides who were willing to take risks and willing to take ownership of a peace process. You don't have that on either the Palestinian side. I mean, we can't even decide who's representing the Palestinians. Is it Fatah or is it Hamas? And on the Israeli side, you've got the extremist right-wing government of Benjamin Netanyahu. And so what is going to be pressured to, from both sides of the international community is to get the Israelis to wake up to the fact that they have to do more to alleviate the suffering in Palestine, even if they're committed to not having Hamas dominate the Gaza area. And at the same time, you've got to encourage the Palestinians to come up with a different leaders than either Hamas or the 87-year-old Abbas of Fatah. And so it's a real puzzle. But I think it's important to note that South Africa is talking to Iran and talking to the leader of Hamas. At least allows for information to flow into those camps, and to emphasize, as South Africa always does, that the human suffering has got to end. But how you get there politically is a real conundrum.
So you spoke in the beginning of your answer about the need for a credible voice as a counterpoint. Is South Africa seen by the international community as that credible voice, given our recent history, in terms of international relations, our standpoint on Russia, the situation with the Lady R? Has that damaged our credibility at all?
Well, now you're conflating, I think, some of my remarks in the sense that it's credible leadership on the part of the Palestinians, which they don't have now, and credible leadership on the part of the Israelis, which they don't have now because this is an extremist right-wing government. And you know, the polling that was done just before October 7th in Gaza suggested that over 60% of the Gazans wanted to protect the peace and make the two-state solution a viable option, but that they did not support Hamas. Now, we don't know that for sure because it was only a poll and it was done by questionable authorities, but nevertheless, it is indicative of a situation that has to be changed somehow. And I think that the more that the U.S. leans on Netanyahu to open up humanitarian corridors from Israel into Gaza, which is not likely yet, but I think is pushing in the right direction, and that the South Africans remind the Iranians that Obama had done a nuclear deal with them that Trump undid, but that Biden wants to get Iran as part of the conversation, even though you know, I heard a NPR and public radio broadcast of an experienced CIA hand who claimed that Iran was behind everything that is occurring in the Middle East. Well, South Africa has good relations with Iran, and so that is a channel for American-South African dialogue, which is very robust. You're going to have the AGOA meeting here in this week, and the future of AGOA. And while everybody's got their domestic opinions to worry about, in democracy certainly, nevertheless, the South Africans have positioned themselves where they're credible with a number of actors in this mess. And that's increasingly important, I think.
So you're talking about, a little bit earlier on as well, the situation not quite being ripe for that agreement around a possible ceasefire to allow humanitarian aid in. What do you think it's going to take? Is it purely a question of time? Is it a question of a multiplicity of pressure? How do we expedite that?
Well, those are very good questions, Emily. But I think really it is a question of time that the Biden administration diplomatically, I'm only surmising here, is pressuring Netanyahu to worry about the hostages and worry about the humanitarian disaster that their bombing is unleashing, but he can't stop the bombing quite yet. I mean, that is to say, Biden can't. But he has slowed down for multiple reasons, no doubt, and I mean, in the Israeli side. Nevertheless, there have not been the invasion that everyone worried about and that I still worry about. But nevertheless, there is a focus on the hostages and getting relief into Gaza. Now, the Israelis maintain that fuel is vital for Hamas to power its tunnels, and I understand their concern, but nevertheless, I think that the humanitarian corridors have to be expanded, have to be getting Doctors Without Borders and other groups, the gift for the givers, making sure that their relief is getting in, and that should be the focus in the short term of the diplomacy that is going on behind the scenes, and I think may yield something of a slowdown in the process. But I can't see any negotiations happening with Hamas or with Netanyahu, frankly. So we've got to contain those two extremists, Hamas and Netanyahu's government, and let the more moderate voices that we know exist within Palestine and we know exist within Israel to get some authority. That's what the South African experience has taught me, frankly, but I don't see it happening anytime soon in Israel and in Palestine.
Thank you so much for speaking to us and for your insights on the situation. That was international relations expert Professor John Stremlau expressing his hesitance over seeing those moderate voices speaking up in Palestine and Israel anytime soon.